After you guys showed tremendous support on the first video in the rebuilding series that I started on this channel, I figured I'd continue with this series today. Except today's video will be a little different because of the team at hand. It is not necessarily a team that needs to rebuild, and they really can't because of their contract situation, but I'm going to display the two routes of how this team can return to the postseason and earn success. What's going on, everybody? It's Jelly J NBA back with another video, and in today's video I'm going to be breaking down whether the Washington Wizards should choose to rebuild or revamp in the upcoming seasons. But before we get into today's video, I'd like to thank you guys for your continued support, and if you are new here and enjoy NBA content, consider subscribing. I upload every single day. First, let me explain how the Wizards got to this point in their timeline for anybody who does not follow them directly. Shortly after the Gilbert Arenas and Antoine Jamison era from 2004 to 2008, where the Wizards made the playoffs every season, they began to decline, and the team only won 68 of 246 games over the next 3 seasons. In 2010, the Wizards had the #1 overall pick in the NBA draft and selected Kentucky point guard John Wall. Wall became the face of the franchise as a promising young player on a team that featured an injury-ridden Gilbert Arenas with a bunch of other bums. Just 2 years later, after struggling to win 30 games both seasons, the Wizards had the 3rd overall pick in the 2012 NBA draft, where they selected Florida freshman phenom Bradley Beal. Beal was highly regarded as one of the best pure scorers in his draft after averaging 14 points for the season on almost 45% from the field, so the Wizards looked to pair him with a young John Wall. In Bradley Beal's 2nd and 3rd seasons in the NBA, the Wizards won 40+ games both years, making the playoffs but losing in the Eastern Conference semifinals to both the Pacers and Hawks. Now, both John Wall and Bradley Beal were the team's best scorers in the playoffs, but they just didn't have enough talent to get over the hump. Fast forward 2 more years, and the team was in the same position, except this time versus Isaiah Thomas's Boston Celtics. Now, this series was one of the best playoff series in recent history. It was very physical, and it featured multiple game winners, but eventually came down to a Game 7 in Boston. In this game, Bradley Beal scored a game-high 38 points, but it just wasn't enough as the Celtics went on to win 115-105. I'd say this was eventually the falling point for the Wizards. After 5 straight seasons of 40+ wins, the team had just lost its step after multiple veterans left in free agency or decided to retire. Fast forward 2 more seasons, 2 horrific, unfortunate John Wall injuries, and 2 massive contracts being handed out to John Wall and Bradley Beal, and the Wizards are at the point they are at today. Not good enough to win much with their current roster, but not bad enough to completely tear everything down and start from scratch. That's where my idea of rebuilding or revamping comes into play. Now let me start with the easier of the 2 choices, that being revamping. Now, the reason why this choice is a lot easier is because the team has both Bradley Beal and John Wall under contract until 2022, and barring any major setback to John Wall, when those 2 are healthy, they are all-star level players. But these 2 also aren't getting any younger, and in Wall's case, any healthier. So for the team to revamp this lineup, they will probably have to make a trade for a proven player now, or make a splash in free agency. Let's take a look towards the free agent class of 2020 first, and the Wizards' biggest need in that regard, that being a big man. With Ian Mahinmi coming off the books this season, that frees up about $15 million in cap space for the Wizards to sign a defensive anchor in the middle and someone who can run the pick and roll with John Wall. Now, the reason why I say this is because Wall found most of his success when playing with big man Marcin Gortat, who was an excellent roll man and set hard screens that allowed Wall to attack defenders going downhill. I'm looking at 2 players in particular that the Wizards could target this offseason, Serge Ibaka and Andre Drummond. Now, Drummond has a player option that he will most likely buy into this offseason because it is worth almost $30 million. But who knows? Maybe he will want to have a better chance to win and take less money elsewhere in a place like Washington. Serge Ibaka, on the other hand, won't have as big as an impact on winning as someone like Drummond would because of his age, but he could definitely help this team out where it needs it and mentor young guys like Rui Hachimura, Mo Wagner, and Thomas Bryant. If the Wizards really believe in the return of John Wall and believe that they can still compete for a championship with just one more piece, a trade for Rudy Gobert could also be on the horizon. Now, this trade would probably have to include the Wizards' best young asset, a trend that has haunted Washington over the years, as well as future draft picks just to land Gobert. Then, the team would have to decide whether it's worth it to give Rudy a max deal. This possibility is a lot less likely than the team signing a veteran in free agency this offseason, but I do still think it's possible since Washington has shown interest in trading for Gobert if things in Utah do go south. Outside of getting a legitimate center, this team is very well put together though. Let's hypothetically say they signed Serge Ibaka this offseason. Their projected starting five for next season would look like this. John Wall at point guard, Bradley Beal at shooting guard, Davis Bertans at small forward, Rui Hachimura at power forward, and Serge Ibaka at center. That's a playoff team in the East, in my opinion. Now let's move on to the much more complicated way, that being a complete rebuild. Now, I hinted at why this way is so much harder than just revamping this team, in large part due to how much money they have committed into Bradley Beal and John Wall at the moment. Beal is clearly the team's best asset, but if you are to trade him, you want to make sure you can get an offer you cannot resist, and I'm just not too sure there's one out there right now that would significantly benefit the Wizards in the long run. I do believe John Wall can still revive his trade value though, especially if he comes back at an all-star level next season. But even then, his contract is so large that any team trading for him would have to be so sure that he's the piece that gets them to a title that they don't mind taking on that contract. I think one action that will slightly display where the Wizards want to go with this team will be in this year's draft. If the team selects a point guard, I think we could see the Wizards try and rebuild things here in the next few seasons by either trading Bradley Beal or John Wall. But honestly, I'm really not too sure they will do that based on how confident they are in Wall returning from injury. Either way though, I'm super excited to see John Wall with this version of Bradley Beal. All Wizards fans know that before Wall suffered those back-to-back injuries, he was still the team's best player. But now, it's almost undisputedly Bradley Beal. I do think there is a common misconception with this team that they need to just tear the whole thing down because they aren't good enough to win a title. But hey, they could get lucky with playoff matchups, injuries, whatever it is. I ain't ready to call it on this team just yet. And that's the video, guys. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, as well as let me know in the comments section down below the route you guys think the Wizards will end up going in. And I hope to see you guys in the next one.